Hi everybody, my name is Alex Goberman. I'm the Interim Dean of the Graduate College here at Bowling Green State University. I'm happy to welcome you to our 3-minute thesis competition for 2022. I'm going to give a little bit of history about the 3-minute thesis first. The 3-minute thesis was developed in 2008 by the Graduate School at the University of Queensland. There's kind of an interesting history to this, is that there was a drought in Queensland at the time, and everybody had 3-minute egg timers to time the time of their showers. Somehow the person in charge of the graduate school in Queensland decided that it would be a great idea to hold a thesis competition where students get 3 minutes to present their work. And that's what led to this now. And currently there are over 900 universities holding competitions in 85 universities worldwide. The aim of the competition is to hone students' academic, presentation, and research communication skills. Here at BGSU, there are 3 awards that we'll be giving today. The third place award will be an award of $200. Second place award will be $300, and first place award will be $500. In addition to our first place winner, will represent Bowling Green State University at the MAGS competition in April, and MAGS is the Midwestern Association of Graduate Schools. First, before we move further, I'd like to thank our judges for their participation today. We have 4 judges. We have Dr. Charles Sines, Associate Dean of the College of Music, Dr. Farida Salim, Associate Professor in Physics and Astronomy, Dr. Janet Hartley, Associate Dean of Schmidhorst College of Business, and Dr. Melissa Burek, Associate Dean of College of Health and Human Services. So thank you to our judges. And next thing I want to do is I'd like to read the rules of the 3-minute thesis. The participants have already heard these rules over and over, but I'd like our folks who are listening to hear the rules. There's 1 static PowerPoint slide is permitted. No slide transitions, animations, or movement of any description is allowed. The slide is to be presented from the beginning of the oration. There's no additional electronic media, no sound, no video files are permitted. No additional props, no costumes, musical instruments, laboratory equipment are permitted. Presentations are limited to 3 minutes maximum, and competitors exceeding 3 minutes are disqualified. Presentations are to be spoken word, no poems, no raps or songs. Presentations are to commence from the stage. Presentations are considered to have commenced when the presenter starts their presentation through either movement or speech. And the decision of the adjudicating panel is final. So I'd like to thank everybody who is watching on the live stream and everybody who is here. And I'd like to move on to our first presenter. And our first presenter is Eleanor Baling from the Department of Biological Sciences.
Testing.
All right, good afternoon. My name is Eleanor Baling, and I'll be talking to you about the novel bacteriophage solution to antimicrobial resistance in lung pathology. So many of you have probably heard of MRSA. That's methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus. This is a bacterium that has evolved resistance to almost all of our modern antibiotics and can now not be cleared with any antibiotics. What you may not know is that MRSA is just the tip of the iceberg. There are hundreds of more bacterial species developing multi-drug resistance. And furthermore, to make this worse, there's only one major pharmaceutical company researching novel antibiotics. And this is because the search for new antibiotics is just no longer profitable. And this lapse in research is incredibly profitable for the bacterial species who are developing this resistance. An alternative therapy to this crisis is paramount for those, especially those with immunocompromised diseases. So my research specifically focuses on those with immunocompromised respiratory tracts, namely in the lungs. So what can we do about these multi-drug resistant infections? Well, one alternative is bacteriophage therapy. And bacteriophage therapy makes use of one of the most abundant organisms on our planet. And this is a small virus that preys on bacteria. So an advantage of these organisms is their abundance. We can find these phage in any environment where bacteria are present. Also, these phage are selectively toxic, and this means that they will infect 1 or 2 species of bacteria while leaving the others and also our human cells unharmed. So where do we get these life-saving viruses from? Well, looking at this side of my slide, my research starts with a soil sample, a fecal sample, or a sewage sample. And this sample, I enrich it with a bacteria that we're trying to target. So this is either a relative of or a clinically isolated multi-drug resistant bacterium. And so we let these bacteria incubate with the phage, our potential phage, overnight or for a few days to allow the phage an opportunity to infect and kill their bacteria. Following this process, we can get out these little phage and purify them and concentrate them, and as a result get a phage cocktail that is used as treatment. We use a cocktail of phage, that's 2 to 4 phage that are similar, because this allows us to clear the infection with fewer repeated treatments, as well as without causing the bacteria to develop phage resistance. Now, bacteriophage therapy is allowing us a targeted method to clear antibiotic-resistant infections while using one of the most abundant agents on our planet. The future of this therapy is critical for those with cystic fibrosis, asthma, and other lung diseases. Thank you.
Next up is Meredith Dixon from Higher Education Administration.
Here. Yeah. Good afternoon. What's up? Hi, bestie. On any given day, these are ways that my colleagues of different generations greet me at work. I, like many, am one of a multi-generational workplace. There are currently 4 generations in the workplace, with Generation Z being the youngest, followed by Millennials, Generation X, and Baby Boomers being the oldest, as displayed on my graphic. With each of these generations come their own experiences and expectations about what is appropriate in the workplace, including how to greet someone. It's important to know that these generations can work together, but current research shows us that these differences can lead to conflict at work. So, how do we create a cohesive multi-generational team? To start, it's important to know 3 things. They're going to disagree, training is increasingly important, and these generations are already learning from one another. So when it comes to disagreement, common areas of disagreement include policies like the dress code. My Baby Boomer and Gen X participants, for example, found no issues with the dress code, although they noticed that over time things had changed, like visible tattoos no longer being a concern. My Gen Z and Millennial participants, however, found dress codes to be, at best, unnecessary, and at worst, potentially racist, sexist, and classist policies. So, the trend among these disagreements about policies is it's typically around policies that are unrelated to the product that people produce at work, like how they dressed that day. The next thing to know is that training is becoming increasingly important. Even Baby Boomers who are transitioning out of the workforce are open to learning new skills. Millennials and Gen X are very open to learning skills that will help them get to the next stage of their career. And Generation Z, being new to the professional workplace, want to know all there is to know about being a professional and are seeking this out from all types of resources, including one participant who noted he's never quite sure what he learned from his supervisor versus what he learned from watching TikTok. And then finally, these generations are already learning from one another. All of my participants were able to share an example of something that they had learned from a colleague of a different generation, whether that be a skill or something related to diversity and inclusion in the workplace. They also all expressed that they were willing to share their own skills and knowledge with their colleagues. So, how do we create a cohesive, multi-generational workplace? We review policies, eliminating those that are no longer necessary, and we provide the logic for the policies that remain. We provide training for employees at every stage of their career, and we allow those employees to engage in those trainings themselves, sharing their own skills and knowledge with their teammates, which allows them to not only increase the knowledge base of their team, but also to build those multi-generational interpersonal relationships. So with that, I say, have a great day at work, besties.
Next up is Jules Padalita from the School of Media and Communication.
Thank you. Are you ready?
Are you going to wander? Did you say
I can just stand here if it's easier. It's not too big of a deal.
Hi, my name is Jules Padalita, and obviously, I love Dungeons and Dragons. You know, like that weird board game from the 80s with the funny-shaped dice and the elves and the magic and the dragons and the dungeons, where a bunch of players come together and take on the characters of a bunch of fantasy adventurers, and they go out and save the day. Now, D&D is currently enjoying its 7th consecutive year of record-breaking profits. Coinciding with this is a rise in interactive media platforms such as Twitch, TikTok, YouTube, and at the same time an explosion of digital D&D content online, from podcasts to comics to TV shows on Amazon. Now, what interested me was this coincidence, and I wanted to examine how this rise in interactive media objects seem to influence the rise in popularity and as well as influence the D&D player themselves. After all, D&D is not a new game, but these interactive media objects are, and I wanted to see the interactions between the two. So, to do this, I conducted a series of focus groups, looking at groups of people currently playing Dungeons & Dragons together. Now, listening to my 35 total individuals, I listened to their experiences playing the game, their interactions with digital media that they consumed, and how the two kind of coincided in the middle. In terms of gameplay, what I found is that as media consumption rates went higher and higher, unsurprisingly, the level of a player's game knowledge, or knowledge about Dungeons & Dragons, drastically went up. Surprisingly, however, the rate in which they strictly adhered to the rules as written of the game actually went down. Instead of pausing the game for minutes at a time to go through a rulebook, using their broad judgment of the game to make split-second decisions and keep gameplay going. Much more important than this discovery, though, was the phenomenon where all of these digital platforms, created for communication and media content, were making it easier for marginalized players, people of color, assigned female at birth players, easier access into the D&D community. See, originally, before Zoom and other such virtual call softwares, if you wanted to play D&D and were a new player, you had to go out into the local area and find people to play with. The problem is that these marginalized players were finding that the sexist and racist overtones of the groups playing at the time, these local leaders were making it harder and harder for them specifically to get into the game, reinforcing the stereotype that it was a space for white cis men. Fortunately, these digital platforms are making it easier for anyone to find groups that they feel comfortable and accepted in. So to summarize, Dungeons & Dragons is having its peak in popularity, due in part to rising interactive media platforms and a rise in digital content. And while there are influences to gameplay itself, the important thing here is that marginalized players are now previously marginalized, finding more success than ever. D&D isn't just more popular than it ever was, it's more inclusive. Thank you. Thank you.
Next up is Jacqueline Shetterly from the School of Media and Communication.
All right, I'm gonna figure this out. Excellent. Have you ever tried to give support to somebody during a difficult time and you weren't sure what to say? Well, that's what my research looks at. Specifically, I'm interested in how romantic partners give victim survivors of sexual assault social support. And I'm interested in this research because time and time again, we've seen previous research has shown that the way a person responds to how someone tells them they've been sexually assaulted is crucial for the victim survivor's healing. Now, to do this, to learn more about this, I interviewed both individuals and couples and asked them about the social support they received or didn't receive. And this gave me a really good idea about what support worked and what support didn't work. And while I found a lot of information from my research, I want to share with you the 5 best practices I gathered from the data. So if you are in a relationship with someone and they tell you they've been sexually assaulted, here's what you should do. First, reassure them. Many victim survivors I interviewed said that they were afraid to tell their partner they'd been sexually assaulted because they were worried their partner was going to leave them. So one thing you can do is to reassure that this new information won't change the way that you see your partner or change the way you see the relationship. Second, mirror them. A lot of my participants said that they liked it when their partner matched the same energy that they had during the conversation, because this put the emphasis on them. So if your partner is casual about the conversation, you can be too. If they don't bring it up at all, follow their lead. 3, emotional support is key. All of my participants said that they needed emotional support to feel cared for and comforted. And emotional support looks like words of encouragement, active listening, physical touch. So if you're in this situation, make sure you're engaging in those things. 4, recognize that this is an important moment for them. Feelings of guilt and shame make it really hard for victim survivors to disclose. So recognize that they are disclosing something to you, that they trust you, and communicate that with them. And 5, recognize that social support will need to change over time. The victim survivor's needs will change, and so you should adjust accordingly. So my dissertation, again, has a lot of information, but these 5 best practices are what I want you to leave with today. So if you find yourself in this situation, just remember these 5 tips. Thank you. Thank you.
Next up is Emma Studer Perez from the Department of Psychology.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. My name is Emma Studer Perez, and today I want to take you back to your childhood. So think back to your childhood, and what was your favorite food? What was the food you desired above all other foods? The food you just wanted to have for dinner instead of whatever your parents selected. Maybe you would negotiate with this food so that if you just ate 10 green beans, you could have this food. Maybe you would just politely ask for this food to be a part of dinner or to have it for dessert. And if all else failed, maybe this was the food that was worth it to throw a temper tantrum until you received it. For me, that was ice cream, specifically mint chocolate chip. But these attempts to influence your parents' food decisions is what we call Pester Power. Now, parents are deemed solely responsible for a child's diet. However, this relationship is likely bidirectional. It goes both ways. Parents do choose what their children have for dinner, but children have the ability to impact what parents select. Now, this has been studied in the restaurant and the grocery store context, and we see that indeed children can influence their parents' food decisions such that they choose foods that are less healthy. However, this has never been studied in the context of eating in the home. Therefore, this is what this study aimed to do. To do this, I created a behavioral measure where parents and children both separately and together chose meals, including main dishes, side dishes, desserts, and drinks. For example, my mom would first choose foods. Then my mom and myself would choose together. And finally, little Emma in a pink dress would then choose foods alone. Now, these foods were analyzed based on major macronutrients, such as calories, sugar, and protein. And what I found was parents were able to impact the protein content in their child's meals, such that they chose meals with more protein. In the other direction, children were able to influence their parents' food decisions, such that they chose foods higher in calories and sugar. So what does this mean? Well, parents can impact their child's protein content in their meals, which may mean that they're fuller for longer or have energy to go throughout their day. In the other direction, children are able to impact calorie and sugar content in their parents' meals. We know consistently consuming over the daily recommended number of calories and sugar can be a risk factor for developing obesity. And currently, 50% of adults and 20% of children are considered overweight and obese. And this costs the American family over $1,400 per year. Therefore, in the future, to promote family health and to combat this obesity epidemic, we need to consider the bidirectional relationship between parents and children and this dynamic in families to then help in the future. Thank you.
Do
you want me to click the next slide?
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our last participant is Catherine Ware from the Department of Biological Sciences.
Yes. Okay. All right, I'd like to get started off by inviting you to think about wildlife conservation and actions related to wildlife conservation. So maybe right off the bat, you think of turning the faucet off when you're brushing your teeth, maybe turning the lights off when you're not in the room, maybe planting trees, but you probably don't think about cutting down trees. And that is the issue that Metro Parks Toledo is facing in Oak Openings Preserve Metro Park. So the Oak Openings is a region in Northwest Ohio that has a lot of globally endangered and rare habitats. So with those unique habitats comes unique animals. And I study birds, and there are some really cool birds in Oak Openings. And one of the unique habitats that could potentially bring in some cool birds are the pine forests. But the kicker is that none of the pine trees that are in the Oak Openings are native to the area or even to Ohio at all. So back in the 1930s, random specks of pine trees were planted all over the Oak Openings Metro Park so that they could grow, get cut down, and then that money could go back to the Metro Parks when it was sold for lumber. Sounds great. but they were never actually cut down, and these pine stands were never managed to keep those forests healthy. So now you have all of these random poor quality pine habitats all over the Metro Park. So Metro Parks Toledo thought, okay, how do we deal with this? It's unsafe for visitors and they're poor quality. So they thought, what if we clear cut them? What if we just cut them down, see what happens? So they did a 14-year study, and they found that even within 1 year, all of a sudden, all of these rare plants were able to start popping up. And that they were no longer being suppressed by the pine trees. So all of a sudden, you have this diversity. And I thought, that's great for plants, but what about the birds? How does that affect bird communities? Are birds even living there at all? And I went out for my master's research, and I surveyed birds in red pine tree plantations, white pine tree plantations, and I compared it to oak forest. So oak forest is kind of the goal habitat that they're going for to revert it back to. And I counted every bird that I heard and saw out there. I counted a bunch of bird nests, and I found some interesting things. I found that the red pine trees are the poorest quality. Hardly anything can grow underneath those trees, so you don't have a lot of birds. There are hardly any resources for them. White pine trees, doing a little bit better, more stuff's able to grow, still poor quality. But compared to the oak forest, that had the most number of birds, the most number of species, and the most number of birds' nests. So oak forest is doing the best. And all of that confirms what Metro Parks Toledo had originally thought. These pine trees aren't functioning as pine trees. And that kind of challenges us as ecologists to rethink about conservation, that maybe, at least from a bird's eye view, maybe cutting down trees can actually be better for conservation. Thank you.
Thank you to all of our participants, and thank you to our judges. We'll take a few minutes right now to determine our winners, and we will announce them soon. You guys ready to hear the results? All righty. So I'm going to read the top three. We're going to start with number 3, number 2, and then the number 1. The number 1 person is the person that will represent BGSU at the MAGS competition in April. So our third place winner is Emma Studer Perez from the Department of Psychology. Congratulations, Emma. Our second place winner is Jules Padalita from the School of Media and Communication. Congratulations, Jules. And our winner for the 2022 3-minute thesis competition is Jacqueline Shetterly from the School of Media and Communication. Congratulations, Jacqueline. Congratulations to all of our competitors. The scores were very close, and I appreciate all of your time to prepare and to present for us. I really want to read your work, but I guess that takes more than 3 minutes. So thank you for all your participation. Thank you to the judges, and thank you to Kim Fleshman, Jonathan Chambers, the other folks in the Graduate College for organizing this. Thank you so much.